Hello and welcome again to Holiday Travel Watch. My name is Frank Breheny. In this vidcast we're going to talk about your rights as an air passenger. For example, if you've been denied boarding or your flight has been delayed or indeed it's been cancelled. The principal European directive that governs your rights is under EU Directive 261/2004. In the first part of this series we're going to look at the scope of the directive, the notices that you should be looking out for, and the defence of extraordinary circumstances. Okay, the directive is very complex, but what I'm going to do now is to set out the scope, in other words, when or how this particular directive applies. So first of all, the qualifying thing is that it relates to community carriers. Those are airlines that are registered within the European community. Secondly, it refers to a situation where you depart from an EU member state airport, or you are flying from an airport outside the EU, returning back to the EU itself. In those circumstances, that is the latter circumstances where you're flying back to the EU, those rights are somewhat curtailed if you've already received compensation or benefits within that destination outside the EU. The next qualifying criteria is where you have a confirmed reservation. So you must have this particular reservation. You must also check in, and where no check-in time has been stated, the directive is quite clear. You must check in 45 minutes before your due departure time. Quite interestingly, the directive does not apply to flights that have been given to you for free or at reduced rate. And probably most important for most of the people who visit our website is the fact that it does apply to package holiday contracts, but not, for example, where the package holiday has been cancelled for reasons other than a flight cancellation. So we receive many complaints from holidaymakers in our helpline, often not knowing what their rights are. They certainly tell us the problem, but they've never been aware of what their rights are whilst they're at the airports or by the airline themselves. The question of notices is covered by Article 14 of the directive, and this issue of notices is quite important. For example, you may have seen some of these notices on billboards around the airport. These are usually paid for by the Civil Aviation Authority, who are the enforcing authority in the United Kingdom for this directive. Quite by interest, I've recently gone to a major UK international airport, and out of some 70 plus check-in desks, I only saw 8 check-in desks with the required notices by law. So Article 14 starts off by saying that when you check in at the airport, you should actually see a notice displayed on the check-in desk which tells you, before you even check in, what those rights are. And I think it's important for the purpose of this vidcast to read out to you what those rights are. Okay, it says, if you are denied boarding or if your flight is cancelled or delayed for at least 2 hours, ask at the check-in counter or boarding gate for the text stating your rights, particularly with regard to compensation and assistance. Now, the situation is quite simple. What must happen in circumstances where you've been denied boarding of an aircraft or cancellation, you must be provided with a written notice of what those rights are. If you are subject to a delay of a flight by 2 hours or more, you must also be given a similar notice. And incidentally, all passengers must be told who are the enforcing authorities in relation to any complaints under 261/2004. So, for example, if you depart from an airport in the United Kingdom, the enforcing authority will be the Civil Aviation Authority. The argument then follows that if you departed from an airport, say in Greece, it will be the Greek Civil Aviation Authorities. The directive also goes on to say that those people with reduced means of sight should also be provided with documentation or information in a suitable form setting out what those rights are. What you should also remember when you're looking for your rights under this particular directive is that the airline, somewhat controversially, can rely on the defence of extraordinary circumstances. Extraordinary circumstances is defined within the preamble to the directive, and essentially says that any air traffic management decision which affects the operation of the aircraft, and provided reasonable steps have been taken, shall not attract compensation. Now, this has caused a great deal of problem, and there have been a number of cases which have gone through, in fact, right up to the European Court of Justice, just to try and determine what this should mean. Now, it appears, on the face of it, at this present moment in time, that the operational movement of aircraft around for maintenance purposes should not necessarily fall, for example, under this particular exception. I think the simple advice to holidaymakers is this. What you need to do is to understand why the aircraft has been taken out of service if your flight has been cancelled. Clearly, if there is a major problem with the aircraft, then yes, extraordinary circumstances exist. But if it is simply the case that they're moving the aircraft around for the benefit of the airline as opposed to the benefit of the passengers, and I think that is the key issue here. And provided you can track for example, the maintenance record of, say, a particular aircraft, which is actually much easier than you can imagine, then you should be able to successfully argue that extraordinary circumstances do not apply in this case. But what I would suggest to you that this is something that you will need legal assistance with, because this is certainly an area which is going to be subject to quite a bit of change, I suspect, in the future. So there is the introduction for you for 261-2004. The following 3 vidcasts are going to go into a little bit of detail now, dealing with denied boarding, flight cancellation and delays, and we will set out in each of those vidcasts what your rights are, what you should expect to receive whenever you encounter those particular problems. So until the next vidcast, have a safe holiday.